Hello everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. If you don't like it, quit! Message received loud and clear. I'm a pasty white Caucasian guy. I pretty much look ginger, but I'm not a redhead. This is relevant to the story. For almost 8 years, I worked at a popular US chain restaurant which specializes in breakfast food that may or may not heavily feature various flavors of pancakes. Over time, several managers came and went, but the one who stuck around was the ladder-climbing, brown-nosing GM whom we'll call Hope. A narcissistic, verbally abusive, control freak, mommy dearest knockoff. Hope had the most grandiose opinion of herself. She had a way of making please and thank you sound like screw you. I did my best to get along with her. Although when dealing with someone who thrives on conflict, the best often isn't enough. She made it clear it was her way or the highway. Her oft-spouted catchphrase was, if you don't like the way I run my store, quit. Among Hope's countless trademark annoying traits included breathing, coming into work wasted and talking smack about everyone to guests and staff alike. She often delivered orders without allowing any responses, then concluded those interactions with, okay. As if that couldn't get any more obnoxious, her faux sincerity was almost accompanied by an annoying crypt keeper cackle. Then she'd roll her crab brown eyes, toss her mouse brown hair over her shoulder and walk away. Funny story. One Christmas, I was unlucky enough to draw Hope's name for the Secret Santa gift exchange. I seriously considered buying her a batch of wire hangers with a card simply saying, no wire hangers ever. I decided against it for the simple reason that it was no secret that I did not like her. It would have been totally obvious who bought her the gag gift. I was one of those highly valued employees, but the way I was treated completely belied the compliments and accolades I received. An example, my schedule being flipped without my consent, day off requests being denied while other employees, mostly older married women and single mothers of small children, as well as Hope's drinking buddies got preferential treatment, always taking the side of the guest when they were angling for a free meal, etc. Perhaps the worst was the bullying and pettiness among certain employees. It was like high school. It got to the point that I flat out refused to exchange numbers with or add any coworkers on social media. It was a rule that I stood by for a very long time. Don't mix business with personal. I've somewhat relaxed that regulation, but for the most part, it's still in place. Once, while in the dining room, another employee poked me in the face with a tampon right in front of the guests as well as Hope and Sunny, the drunken assistant manager. I filed an official complaint and nothing came of it. This is one such occasion where they couldn't claim ignorance. My complaint made it real and they had to address it. Address it, they did. They saw me as a whistleblower. Neither Hope nor Sunny could have cared less about staff morale. It was typical of both those embittered hags to accept hearsay as fact. They rarely did their diligence in getting both sides before plotting a course of action. Oh, and plot they did. Unfortunately, the following shows they responded to my complaint to workplace bullying with malicious intent. It was at this point I began receiving customer complaints. Most of the time, Hope and Sunny would take the word of the so-called customer or the server passing on the complaint without offering up any proof a discrepancy had even occurred. I later came to learn the complaints were completely fabricated. It was really a coworker just trying to stir their pot. This whole horror story came to its climax when a cokehead, now former employee, circulated a rumor that I refused to wait on an elderly African-American military veteran because I was a racist. Being a veteran myself, I respect all veterans. I found it alarmingly laughable at best because, 1, I am a very gay man, and 2, most of my boyfriends haven't been white. Heck, everyone including Hope and Sunny met my Brazilian ex-boyfriend, who looked black, when he had previously popped in for Sunday brunch. So you can understand why this accusation was out of character and completely out of the blue. It reeked of sabotage. It was too outlandish to be anything else. So the write-up came. I was absolutely furious as my suspicions that I'd been set up were confirmed. Both Hope and Sunny would not let me get a word in. I finally got their attention by stating, in a raised voice, that I had a right to have my say. Surprised at my assertiveness, both went slit-eyed and rather smugly said, "Go on." I pointed out to them that all my guests love me. Several of my regulars are Hispanic or African American, and in nearly 8 years of employment, never once have I been accused of being prejudiced or bigoted. I also pointed out that one of my regulars, a married female African American doctor, if my hands were free, would run up to me and give me a big hug, kiss me on the cheek, and hold me so tight I felt like I was being suffocated. Hope and Sunny were having none of it. I also pointed out that the drama-starting liar who filed the complaint against me had been fired because she was caught by Hope snorting cocaine in the ladies' room. Given her predisposition to lie, the validity of her accusation should be questioned and the write-up destroyed. Based off their surprised expressions, it was clear I had exposed their complicitness in creating a hostile work environment, but they refused to take the bait. Completely done with it all, I flat out bellowed, "I am not, nor have I ever been a racist." I'm pretty sure the entire store heard me. Then I went for the zinger that lingers. You have no idea how many black men have been in my bed. You could have heard a pin drop. Diamanda, the Creole prep cook, was walking by the open office door when I let out that line, and she nearly doubled over with laughter. There were 2 training managers facing away from us while they were on the computer doing online courses. They almost collapsed onto the keyboard, then turned around looking at me with shocked expressions on their faces. Sunny's face went beet red. Hope's face turned white and her eyes widened. "You know what, Hope? Remember how you said if I didn't like the way you ran things, I should quit? Goodbye." I didn't even give them a chance to respond. My shift was about to start in less than 7 minutes. I took off my key fob, laid it on the safe, emptied my apron, put everything in a takeout bag, did an about face and walked out echoing, "Have fun trying to cover my shifts." It was exhilarating and liberating all at the same time. It was like the end of Private Benjamin, when Goldie Hawn walked out of her wedding and threw away her veil, except I've never worn a dress. Just kidding, yes I have. Aside from returning 2 weeks later to get my final paycheck, I haven't set foot in there. I have no reason to be back. I have a new job at a wonderful company with great bosses that value me as an employee and a person. I actually look forward to going to work now. I never thought that was possible. Double plus, they don't expect me to be an emotionless robot. The amount of stuff they were allowed to get away with is surprising. Considering this is a proper chain they're working at, you would think that there would be some kind of resource to help somebody out in this situation. If you were in OP's shoes and you got these incredibly false accusations thrown at you and the managers were being complicit in trying to down you for it, what would you have done or said? Let me know in the comments below. Teacher lets students change a rule. Back in high school, we had this history/civics teacher. He was young and actually gave a poop and tried to make learning about the way Congress and the Constitution worked fun. He was a good teacher. Let's call him Mr. Prez. Mr. Prez was also a little nerdy and loved to get off on technicalities, and while he was cool, he was inflexible about rules that most teachers didn't care about. Wearing hats, eating a snack quietly, water bottles. I'm sure he was trying to make some larger point about discipline or structure or something. We had class with him during 4th period, right before lunch, so we were always starving in his class. One day during a break between 2nd and 3rd period, we hear from other students that Mr. Prez is doing an exercise today where he lets the class act as Congress to make a bill to change a rule. He would act as the president with veto power, but the Congress could overrule him with 2/3 of the vote, like the US Constitution states. Of course, periods 1 and 2 shot for the moon with legislation like no final or no more homework, which passed unanimously, but Mr. Prez said, "Sure, I'll take a look," and continued class, at the end revealing that he was pocket vetoing the bills. A chicken poop loophole where the president can just not sign or veto a bill and thus it would never come to the 2/3 vote. It was a way for us to learn about the president's powers and balance of powers, etc. Anyway, cut to 4th period. With that inside tip, I convinced our class to vote on something he might actually consider: the ability to eat and drink in class. We were hungry as freak, after all, and most teachers let us eat in their classes. We draft the legislation, get majority vote, and Mr. Prez receives our bill. You know, in the other classes, I wasn't going to entertain this, but I'm just going to veto this. If you get 2/3 majority vote, it's yours. To which we then revote, get the votes, and the rule is changed. Next day, our first day allowed to eat and drink in class, I showed up with 2 coolers and a bag full of plastic champagne flutes. Hide them in the bag before class. About halfway through class, I stand up, start handing out champagne flutes to the class, and pull out a dozen bottles of ice-cold Martinelli sparkling cider, pouring them and handing them out to everyone in my class. "What are you doing, OP?" The bill passed. "Well, at least pour me one of those." The class erupted in laughter. I poured him a glass of cider and we toasted to democracy. Mr. Prez was a good teacher. I think one of the main things you remember from high school as far as being in class are those moments with the good teachers that actually cared. And I know for a fact that this is a story that OP will never forget about because it was so good and so enjoyable and also educational at the same time. You want every single cup clear and spotless? Gladly. This happened a little over a week ago. I just haven't gotten around to posting it yet. I work at a popular steakhouse in Arkansas as a head server. I respect my boss immensely, although sometimes his business strategies aren't the brightest. He's a very good man at heart and always wants the best for the restaurant. You'll never see him not smiling. We'll call him Mr. Custard. Shortly before we reopened for business, we did to-go options during full lockdown, but we are now open for dine-in as well. He was given a grant to clean the restaurant as well as possible before reopening. He set out to spend every dime of it. I, as well as many others, were there 40 or more hours a week for 2 weeks doing little else but scrubbing, bleaching, disinfecting, and degreasing every inch of the store. I was really very proud of the job we were doing, as was Mr. Custard. About 3 days before we opened, Mr. Custard asked me to bleach every single cup we own and scrub them by hand. I was one of the more meticulous cleaners, so it's understandable that he would give me this job. This was no small task, and it would take several hours. This was fine by him as long as every cup was clear and see-through, rather than browning or foggy. After doing almost 200 of them, I found that many were not lightening up. They were just old. I showed Mr. Custard a few, and he insisted that I throw away the ones that didn't let up. He wanted only the best. I asked him if he was sure about this, as it would be a lot of cups. Completely positive, he said. I bleached over 400 cups and cleaned each one by hand. Then, as I put each one away, I checked to make sure they weren't foggy. If they were, they got thrown away. When I showed Mr. Custard the finished product, he was initially pleased. Sitting in front of him were perfect cups. Then he realized only about 1/3 of the cups remained. A large majority of our cups were just too old to be clear again. He maintained a smile, but I could see him dying a little bit inside when I told him that's all we had left. Not surprisingly, we ordered more cups. In rare circumstance, it appears we have a manager here that actually cares. A good manager, and somebody when faced with adversity simply grins and powers through it. It sounds to me like Mr. Custard would be somebody that I would be happy working for. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know which story and why in the comments below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.